Hello everyone, well met alchemists. My name is Rebecca and today on Dragon's Hoard we are going to go over Alchemized by Sen Lin Yu. As we go over this gut-wrenching, shocking read, I hope that this can give you some light on what this story is truly about and not just what it's marketed as. And let's get started with our cover review. So I do actually have a physical copy of the book. See, she's beautiful. However, I will not be holding this thing the entire time we're talking about the cover review, so I am probably just going to put it up beside me somewhere. That way we can look at it because it's heavy. Alright, so Alchemized. Just looking at the cover at a glance, we do notice that it appears to be cracked and weathered and worn. The cover itself appears to be an oil painting, a cracked oil painting. And once we really begin to look at the images that are portrayed on this cover, then we do begin to realize that there is a very dark and weighted aspect to the designs and the details on this cover. Everything on the cover appears to be very heavy, very weighted, especially the architecture that we can see on the cover. And the architecture itself, it's done in a very gothic fashion. There are very tall spires, there's arched windows, everything seems to be covered with a thick fog that's falling around it. Also including part of that architecture, if we look closely at the main gate that is portrayed in the lower right hand corner of the cover, it appears to be made of a conglomeration of the bones of multiple arms and legs. It looks like there's a rib cage on there, presumably of metal, at least we hope it is, because that would be a giant skeleton, because the only person that we do see on the cover appears tiny. They look like an ant. And another thing that we can notice if we look really closely at the cover is that there's a bunch of little bitty, teeny tiny alchemical symbols that are just floating around the entire cover. So that really draws us into the cover to look at all of the little details, because once you start seeing some of the details, some of the larger details, like the bones on the gate and the spires of the buildings, there's fog, the colors used in the cover, then you start looking closer and you notice that it looks cracked. You notice these little alchemical symbols that are all floating around all over the cover everywhere. But one of the most intriguing things, the thing that interested me the most, was the fact that the only color, the only true color that we see on this cover is the splotch of red. And it appears to be a bright red cloak that someone is wearing. And as I mentioned before, this person looks minuscule. They look tiny. They look to be about the size of an ant because of how small they are compared to everything else on this cover. Perhaps the person within this story feels diminutive compared to everything else that's going on in the world at this time. And the last thing that we have on this cover is the author's name and the title of the work itself. Both of these things are done in a bold-faced letter type, but each of these letters have a small point that give these letters an extra little detail to them, so that it's not just cut and clean. No, they have these little small points, so it looks a little more intricate. I do really like how the title and the author's name are both done in gold, and however that the author's name is done in a paler gold than what the title of the book is done in. I believe that really offsets the title of the book from the rest of the cover because of the darkness that the cover has. However, it still complements the dark tones and the bright red that the figure is wearing on the cover. So those aspects of the colors used, and then of course the colors that were not used on the rest of the cover, that creates the draw into the cover itself. So you're first drawn to the gold letters, the big gold letters that say Alchemized. But from there you're like, oh, what's this little red thing? And you're like, oh, that's a person. And then you start looking at all of the rest of the details, the background that is all of these spires and arched windows, there's fog, there's trees, there's symbols, it looks like an oil painting. All of these things are what draw you into the cover itself. And that is just for the dust jacket. But when you read the title, you may be familiar with alchemy, but you don't know what alchemized means. And that is another thing that draws you in. And you're like, okay, well, I know what alchemy is kind of. What is alchemized? What happened? I'm assuming they did some type of alchemy on something, but why is the book just titled Alchemized? And if we remove our dust jacket, then the hardback itself, hold on, we have this beautiful gold Ouroboros on our cover. An Ouroboros is a mythological creature, and it's an ancient symbol. It can either be a serpent with no wings, no legs, or it could be a dragon. As we can see here, this one's supposed to be a dragon that is devouring its tail, and the importance of this is what this symbolizes. And usually this is associated with cyclic renewal, eternity, and the unity of opposites. The Ouroboros has its origins in Egypt, but it is also mentioned in Gnostic, Norse, and Hindu traditions, which is very interesting in my opinion. During the Renaissance, alchemists would use the symbol of the Ouroboros to symbolize or to represent the nature of their work and also for the search of immortality. Now, in a different aspect to that, if we look at real world occurrences when we do see a snake trying to devour itself, which is called an Ouroboros condition, this usually only occurs in captivity, and it's only when a snake is exposed to extreme stress. It's too hot, it's extremely hungry, too hungry, or it's disoriented. Usually, any of these things can provoke it. If the snake becomes disoriented, then he will begin to eat his tail because he'll mistake it for food. Especially, for example, rat snakes or king snakes, they're known to eat other snakes. It's possible he could mistake his own tail and try to eat himself. This is reversible if you can get them to a vet in time, though, so don't worry. All right, and lastly, for our cover review, one of the other things that I really liked was the inside of the dust jacket because it's not just white or black or whatever. It does have details on it. Look at that. It's so pretty. Oh, and I was almost forgetting our page here. Look at it. I love it. The details, incredible. The cover itself, perfection. Without a dust jacket, nice. For our cover, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars just on the cover. I really liked how it was done. I think it was very cohesive and it suited the story itself very well after I read it. And now let's get into the synopsis of what this story actually is, what goes on, and why it's such a big deal. I would say we're going to do a quick little rundown over this. However, Alchemized is not a quick little story to read. It is over 1,000 pages. I will do my best not to spoil anything. However, I don't have any promises for you because there's just so much that goes on within the story. So, Alchemized itself is an adult dark fantasy romance according to all of the marketing that it's been having. It is also categorized as gothic literature because it is dark. It is also supposed to be a Hermione fanfic based novel. As the title suggests, it is based around alchemy being its central plotline. It is both the magic system and the driving plotline. Our story begins based around the FMC. Her name is Helena Marino, and Helena is a healer. She has an important support role in this war, but she originally came to Palladia as a foreign alchemy student. We begin seeing Helena come out of a preservation tube, and this tube is meant to keep the bodies fresh for the necromancers to use to create their little zombie peoples. And these brainless type revived bodies are typically used as servants or just as frontline fighters. There are others, as I mentioned in my 3-minute review, that they are referred to as liches. However, these liches, they have more autonomy, they can make decisions, they can lead the other revived bodies. This is where we start our story with Helena. We don't know what's going on except for what Helena learns what is going on. And as she's learning what's going on, she isn't really understanding much of anything. It just so happens that someone somehow rewrote her brain. They completely rewrote her brain. She has no recollection whatsoever of what she could possibly know that the High Necromancer, who is our main antagonist in this story, wants to know. Like, he wants to know, what is it that's in your brain? Because I know it's important. What is it that you have in here that I can't get to? And she is sent to his right-hand man that we only know as the High Reeve. And he's a political figure that has been making appearances for the High Necromancer since the Necromancers have taken more control over Palladia. So the other forces, they have, I suppose we could say, the protagonists, they're actually taking a backseat in the war. They aren't doing too good. They're losing the war to these Necromancers and all of the necromancy that's been going on. Helena has no idea. She's like, I know just about as much as you do. I have no idea who did this. I don't know how they did this. I don't know when they did this. I have no idea what is in my brain. I just know I can't remember anything. I know I was a healer. I know my name. Just basic details like that. She knows who she is, It does take her a minute, but she knows who she is. She knows what she did. She remembers spending time in the hospitals healing people, seeing all of the destruction, all of the chaos, the people dying, bleeding, just injuries everywhere, being overworked and burnt out. She remembers all of that. So she has no idea what she could possibly remember that is so important for the High Necromancer to find within her brain. And she is sent to live with the High Reeve so he can do these experiments on her, so he can do something known as transference because of his type of alchemy, which might be vivimancy or animancy. I don't remember. There's a lot of different types of alchemy. It gets confusing. Trust me, it's confusing. I made a list and I had to read it while I was reading the book. I was like, okay, what's going on here? But he's doing what's supposed to be transference, and it's where he tries to transfer his consciousness into her consciousness so he can get into her brain and like dig around in there. And when he does this, when he's digging around in her brain trying to figure out what she knows, then because he's forcing his consciousness into her consciousness, it causes her brain to swell up, basically her to like start having seizures. She passes out, she gets fevers, things like that. So they end up having to go slower. And as they're doing this, they space it out that way she can recuperate. They get her back on her feet. Eventually, the doctor that has been checking on her, the one who found her from the stasis tube, that's what they call it. The stasis tube, she's been coming to the High Reeves mansion to check on her, give her checkups, give her vitamins if she needs them, say, hey, she needs to eat this, she needs to go do exercise, make her go outside, she needs sunlight, she needs to walk, keep her alive. We need to know what's in her head. That's what Helena is going through all this time. That's just part one. This story is broken down into two parts, and I love it and I hate it at the same time because as you're going through part one, you're starting to get a grasp on the characters. You're starting to get a grasp on who everyone is, what they do, what their powers are, things like that. But then you reach the end of part one, and when you hit part two, instead of continuing on from where you make it to, which is when Helena is about to, like, they're about to tell you, hey, I'm getting my memories back. I'm remembering. I kind of know what's going on now. You get sent all the way back to before she was put into the stasis tube. Brother. So when you get sent all the way back, you're left wondering, why? Why am I here? Because it does start with a completely different person, someone you're not very familiar with. I believe you just hear his name in passing in part one, things like that. And then you just have to build that entire repertoire over again. So it's almost like you're reading a whole other book when you start part two. Now, when you get to part two, you do realize more and more that Helena was a part of our hero, Palladia, because he's like the founder of the alchemy school. It's called the Alchemy Tower. She was his friend. She was a close friend of his. She was in his inner circle of friends. And she is placed there strategically by his aunt to be his friend because of her alchemy skills, because of her skill set in particular and the type of alchemy that she possesses. And she's brilliant. But even though she was part of their friend group, she always felt like an outcast. Why, you may ask? Because in Palladia, Helena comes from a southern region where, this is going to sound awful, but it's true. This is how this is written. And I understand why it's written this way, so don't get mad. But the southern region, of course, they are described as being more rambunctious. They're louder, they're more expressive. They don't just speak with no expressions, no body language. Their skin color is a bit darker. Their hair is wild. It's curly. They live near the sea, of course, so you know what humidity does to curly hair and salt water. And Helena gets the opportunity to go to Palladia to study at the Alchemy Tower because of her abilities. But when she gets there, she's thrust into the world that's prim and proper. People don't talk with expressions. There's no body language. They'll say one thing, but they'll mean another. That is what Helena has to deal with when she goes to the Alchemy Tower to study alchemy, which is it's a culture shock if you have to do something like that and go to some new place with different customs, get adjusted, and then everyone says one thing, but they mean another. So even if they're saying something nice to your face, they mean that they'd rather stab you in the back. That is what Helena has to deal with because they also have these political and religious reasons that Helena is beneath them. And like I said, because of Helena's unique skills, when the war starts, then she is thrust into the world of being a healer. She's been studying for that. Now, Palladia has experienced a necromancy war previously. So throughout this book, that'll be referred to as the first necromancy war. And as the heroes in part two are losing ground, they're losing men, there comes an offer for help from an unexpected ally. And this ally is coming from within the ranks of the enemy. But this offer comes with conditions, and one of those conditions is that after the war, everything he's done, he receives a full pardon. But he also wants Helena Marino during the time he's working as a double agent and also after the war is over. I know these are strange conditions for someone to request these two things. You think, well, what the heck, man? It makes sense when you read it, okay? It's explained. I promise. You get an explanation for why, but I'm not telling you now. Go read it. So when this offer comes, then Helena's higher ups, the people who allowed her to be at the alchemy tower studying, they decide to say, hey, you know what? We got this offer for help. This is what we need you to do. We need you to agree whether you want to or not, even though we're going to say we give you a choice whether you agree or not. We really need you to say yes and do whatever this man wants. She believes that no matter what he asks her to do, she will do it because they need the information that he's willing to provide them. She doesn't see herself as any more valuable than anyone else that's fighting in this war right now, so she's willing to do it. After Helena accepts to take on this mission and to sway this enemy who is supposed to be giving them information or doing things for them, her additional mission is to ensnare him, make him their dog, basically. And after she accepts this and she's working with him, he actually realizes that she will do whatever it takes to give her side the slightest chance of winning this war. Now, if I didn't mention it, our double agent, his name is Kane Farron, and he's referred to in this part of the book as Farron. He bores of her quickly until one day they're supposed to meet somewhere and Helena finds him injured. He is messed up, but instead of killing him like her side would want her to do if presented with this actual opportunity that she does get, he actually warms up to her when she heals him. But it's not so much in like a sweet way that you hold on to somebody. No, it's obsession. He is obsessed with her. And of course, the war is continuing to wage on, and the information passed by Farron and his interference with their war efforts for the enemy side, it's beginning to take a toll. Someone's starting to notice that things aren't going great for the enemy side. The High Necromancer Morrow, he is becoming more and more paranoid because he knows something's going on. He knows there is a mole somewhere. So he starts torturing his own people, or at least making Farron do it. And Morrow is becoming weaker and weaker as these interferences are going on. Now, everything's starting to look up. We're starting to think, hey, our heroes are going to win this war. Everything's going to be great. They're going to be fine. They've got this in the bag. That's true until the heroes' party is absolutely devastated. They do persevere. They recuperate the hero. His paladin, his right hand paladin, doesn't die. The hero's paladin doesn't die. But the way in which they recuperate the hero uses Helena's unique skill set, and when she does this, then everyone thinks of her as being something dirty. Now, eventually, as we're reading along, she does discover the horrendous truth about what really happened to the hero because he's been acting weird since they got him back. He's been really weird. She figures out what happens and she knows what they have to do. So she puts an end to it. And after putting an end to it, then she is attacked and injured, and then Farron is the one that takes her and helps her recuperate. And he tells her as soon as he can, he's sending her away to somewhere safe where she will be safe from the war. But just before her departure, she is hell-bent on destroying the laboratory Morrow created for conducting experiments. And once again, she is faced with an adversary. She is overpowered. They capture her, and then this is where she is placed into that stasis tank where we see her in part 1. I may have said there were only 2 parts to this story. I was wrong. I forgot. There's 3. And from here, then we go on to part 3. And of course, part 3 is just going back to where we left at part 1 before we got into part 2. We're just picking up where we left off. And we find out that Helena is recuperating her memories like we said she did. But at the same time, because of the present that she's living and the memories that are coming flooding back, she doesn't know what is actually the present and the past. She's having issues separating those two. And once Farron realizes that Helena is recuperating her memories, he takes care to take Helena with him and show her, hey, these are the parts of the house that Morrow can't spy on. And they do, of course, have like a little squabble because of what he put her through when she arrived at his home. Basically, to be broken down and interrogated by the High Necromancer's most powerful, Undying, because that's what Farron is. He is part of the revived undead. And Farron lets her know, hey, it's time. I'm getting you out of here. I don't care what you say. You're leaving. I'm tired. I'm tired of everything. I want you safe. Helena pleads with him to at least give her the chance to try and reverse what Morrow did to him to make him an Undying in his necromanced armor. This is a whole other level of necromancy and puzzling out and hoping, and then there's the alchemical arrays. Well, the arrays are part of the magic system. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. That Farron here has carved into his back as a punishment by Morrow. Eventually, she does figure out how to reverse everything. She figures out what she has to do, she figures out what she needs for it, how to rewrite it, how to undo what was done to him. They get the key piece that will make him human again instead of undying. But once they do this, once Farron is no longer under Morrow's thumb, then they are exhausted, they're half dead. They decide, you know what, burn down the Farron mansion, we're getting out of here. And they escape Palladia. They do make multiple stops before reaching their final destination, or at least we think it's their final destination. It's actually where Farron is taking her to meet up with one of her close friends from her past, who also happened to be part of the hero's party. It was his right hand. And her name is Layla Bayard. And it just so happens that Lila was pregnant with the hero's child. And Lila hates Farron with a passion. She despises his guts. But Farron ended up saving Lila at Helena's request. When they meet up with her, Farron tries to stay out of Lila's way just so he doesn't cause problems between him and her, and which will make things awkward for Helena because of everything that she's been through. Helena is also pregnant at this time. I didn't mention that, but it is a very big thing in the story. Very traumatic how it occurs. I'd rather not go into it during this review. I would recommend that you do check trigger warnings because there's a lot of dark stuff in here. It's complicated, to say the least. Eventually, they do make it to the final destination with Farron's pet chimera, which was one of Morrow's experiments. This chimera is named Amaris. He's actually thinking of getting rid of the chimera so no one can trace it back to them. However, Helena convinces him, just put her to sleep and we'll leave her here. And when they do reach this final destination, everyone's on edge. They are worried that they have been followed or that someone recognized them. They know who they are. However, they don't. They're okay. They're good for now. Some time skips and then their baby is born. And this baby we get to see when she's a toddler. She grows up with Lila's child. His name is Paul, short for Apollo. Eventually, outside countries finally decide to come into Palladia and help their forces get rid of the necromancers. This is mostly because of the Lumithium mines within Palladia. That's a whole other thing, part of the story. But this is the reason that the other countries come in, for their own economical gain, not just because they're helping another country. No, it's just economy. Lila, of course, decides, I need to kill Luke's murderer. I need to kill Morrow because he killed the father of my child and I loved him. So I need to kill this villain. And she does. She goes back to Palladia, she kills the villain, and then she eventually comes back for Paul because she decides she's going to take Paul back to Palladia and reestablish the alchemy tower so that there is somewhere people will have to go so they can study alchemy again. And eventually she does make it. She makes it work. She creates the alchemy tower again. She even adds vivamancy as a part of her curriculum within the alchemy tower, which was not a part prior because it was looked down upon from the social and religious aspects within this story. And Helena and Farron, they continue to live on this little island where they escaped to, but they live with the consequences of their PTSD and everything they went through and everything they did as they were trying to help the war effort. It's not only mental issues that they're dealing with their PTSD, they do have lasting physical consequences that come with all of this trauma that they experienced. Eventually, there's another time skip, and now their daughter, her name is Enid, named after Farron's late mother. She is now 19 years old, and Lila offers her the opportunity to go to the alchemy tower to study alchemy. And Enid, because she's in this southern province, she is invited as a foreign student, much like her mother was at the beginning of the book, or whenever we figure out that she was a foreign alchemy student. Once Enid reaches Palladia, we do get to see Palladia's been reconstructed, necromancy is gone, the alchemy tower is reestablished, and there are history books written about the war and the people that were involved in this war. And we get to see that, as usual, history is written by the winner. For me, this was the absolute worst part of the entire story, was reading the last chapter of this book from an emotional standpoint. I wouldn't say it's the most horrid thing that occurred, but emotionally this was what wrecked me the most. After going through all of the other emotional wrecks that was the book, this just was the last shebang. So Enid is looking around local bookstores for the history of what occurred during the war. She's looking for the true history history, because remember, her parents are the two biggest figures that did anything and actually are the reason that the war ended. And when she finds an entry in a book about Cain Farron, her father, he is described as a monster crueler and more deadly than the High Necromancer Morrow himself. And it is presumed that if he hadn't died, then the High Reeve would have taken Morrow's place after Morrow's death. But there's a quote that explains this beautifully. Right, so I'm going to read you this little scene. It's not just a quote, but you need a little more context to understand what's going on. It's towards the end of the book. Cain and Helena are having a disagreement with each other, and he tells her, "Don't ask questions you don't want answers to." "Did you kill them?" Her voice sharpened. His eyes flashed. "Yes, I did all of this for convenience, which you know I have so abundantly in my life, with my two mutually exclusive masters." Guilt caught in Helena's throat like a stone. "I don't want you to kill people because of me." He gave a barking laugh. "What exactly is it that you think I do with all my time? I kill people. I order other people to kill people. Train people to kill people. I sabotage and undermine people so that they will be killed. And I do it all because of you. Every word, every life, because of you." Now, needless to say, because it says it's about her, he does it because of her, Helena makes it about her and her abject horror and believes Cain is blaming her for what he has done. But in reality, if we look at it, he's just saying, "I do this because I'm obsessed with you, and I will do all of these terrible things, not just for one, but two people, just to try to keep you alive." That's what he's trying to say. He's trying to convey to her, "I do all of this because I want you to live." And she just takes it as, "I'm blaming you that I killed all of these people or made other people kill people because of you." So that's what happens there. Now, since we know Cain's in these history books, now I'm assuming you're asking, okay, well, what about Helena? Helena isn't even mentioned. Everything she did, everything she experienced, everything she survived, she went through: the trauma, the grief, the injuries, the near-death experiences, losing her father, losing her best friend, having to orchestrate his murder, having to actually use necromancy. Her name isn't dropped a single time except in the footnote of a photograph. I'm going to read it to you. And that photograph is of Soren Bayard, who was Lila Bayard's brother, Helena Marino, and Luke Holdfast. So Luke was the father of Lila's baby. In it, of course, is distraught because she says her mother doesn't deserve to be forgotten like this. She deserves an entire chapter on herself, and it is so true. She shouldn't be a footnote. And it also mentions that she should have an entire book dedicated to her and what she did and what she went through. All right, so with that photograph, the photo caption read, "Hibernal Solstice, Solar Year 1786 PD. Principate Lucian Holdfast with Paladin Soren Bayard, see Bayard Soren Chapter 12, A Life of Legacy, and foreign-born alchemist Helena Marino. Marino left the city at the start of the Palladian Civil War to study healing. She survived the war but died during imprisonment prior to the liberation. She was a non-active member of the Order of the Eternal Flame and did not fight." That's the picture. That's all there is for everyone to remember Helena Marino and everything she did during the war and what she went through, and that's all they give her. That's all they give her, and I hate it so much. I hate it because of everything that she goes through. I've heard reading it in Manacled is worse. I don't know, I've never read Manacled, I just wanted to read Alchemized, but it gets me every time, and I hate it. I hate the way that she was made into a nobody, when in reality, Helena is the only reason that Lila Bayard, her son Paul, exist, and the Alchemy Tower was rebuilt, and Morrow was finally killed officially, and so does their daughter Enid, and she wants to change it. She wants the world to know what all her parents did and that they actually did all of these amazing good things or were able to end the war. But Paul tells her her parents probably don't want her to stir up the peaceful life that they have now at the end, and that's where the story ends. So that is the ideal idea of what goes on in this book. Like I said, it is a heavy read, so I will recommend you check the trigger warnings before picking it up. So now that I'm coming off of that emotional ride, let's get into my thoughts and opinions on what I thought about the entirety of the book in general. Okay, so the setting of this book is very dark. It's disturbing. Definitely not for the weak of heart. That is one thing I will definitely say. It almost feels more like it leans towards a horror story more than fantasy or dark fantasy, anything like that. It feels more horror based. I did read a little bit that that's why it's considered a gothic novel. The world itself is devastated. It's bleak. It's dark. It's filled with sorrow and mourning. There's fluttering hopes that the battles will end soon, but usually it just leads into another battle itself. Everyone's hoping their friends will stop getting turned into necrothralls, which is what the zombies are called. And it's a difficult landscape to get into, but it's exactly what this particular story needs. The romance itself within this story takes a backseat. The romance is not the focus. I'll tell you that right now. Not the focus. And as I said, as far as the trigger warnings go, this story deals with death, it deals with gore, mutilation, war crimes, torture, great assault, among other things. As I said, it's very dark. It's also very depressing, so be careful if you could possibly be affected by these kinds of things. Be careful reading this. For me, I rated this book a 5-star, not because it's one of the more flashy, interesting, intricate fantasy worlds with these amazing characters that have you looking up to them and saying, hey, I wish I could be you. I wish I could be in your world, in your place, doing what you did. But rather because of how insanely powerful it is once you reflect upon everything that went on within the story and how the characters grew, how they progressed. And then you realize that this is a masterpiece. This was masterfully done. It was incredible. If I could give it more than 5 stars, I would. This, I believe, will go on my Roman Empire shelf. I'll eventually put the shelf up. Don't worry. Bring it in there. Be patient with me. But this goes into my Roman Empire reads as of right now. And it might be frustrating while you read it with the way that it is broken into 3 different sections, 3 parts. However, this is a masterful way to convey everything that you need to understand about this story. It allows us to get to know Marino, where she's at when we start. When we go to part 2, then we get the full cast of characters, so we know what all we're dealing with, the political and religious sides of things within Palladia, what happened before the previous Necromancer War, things like that, and then a little bit of lore of their history of Palladia that help us understand the story better. And then when we go back to part 3, or when we go to part 3, then we get everything from part 1 and 2 mashed together so everything makes sense and we understand why it was necessary to do it that way. And while we do that, then we do get to see that the good guys weren't always that good either. Because of their ideals and their bigotry and their alchemy always revolving around the religious bigotry roots, they weren't good in every aspect. They had their flaws. A lot of people were shunned, a lot of people were cast down. There's apparent racism in this story. Things are done blatantly, but in a way that doesn't scream it in your face. It's there, but it's not like I'm shoving it at you. It's already there. It's integral. It's a part of the story. It's a part of this world. One of the things I really did enjoy, though, when we did change from in part 3 was a neat little differentiation that the author did with how Helena refers to Farron, and it determines the current relationship between them. So when Helena was given the option of accepting her mission to work with Farron, and she decides to work with him, she knows his full name is Cain Farron. When she meets him, and then multiple times after her first meeting with him, he's cold, he's indifferent, he doesn't care. She's just irrelevant to him. She refers to him as Farron, his last name. But when they start warming up to each other, when their relationship begins to evolve and she starts to get closer to him, then she starts calling him Cain. Now, when we go to part 1 again and we look at it, and she's sent to the High Reeve, she refers to him as Farron. And she continues to do so even after her memories have returned for a time. She continues calling him Farron until she begins to tell the difference between past and present. And then she finally starts calling him Cain again. And I just really enjoyed this. I thought this was very well done. Because in this manner, we see the 2 different sides of this character. His very cold, cruel, calculating side, and then the side that is obsessed with her. He's warmer towards her. He actually shows he cares about her. And then, of course, this book is written in 3rd person, limited point of view, so we only know what Helena knows, which is also very cleverly done. Since she has amnesia and everything like that, we have no other information. We just know what she knows in that moment and what she goes learning bit by bit by bit, and then we go back and get the whole backstory, and then we jump back to where we left off. And I think think that just really helps pull us into this world so we can understand truly what's going on. As I said, this is a 5-star read for me, Into the Roman Empire for me. It was dark and painful and devastating, but I did love how it was able to evoke such raw emotions during this read and as you finish the book. And then if you start thinking about it after you read it, it's going to hit you now and then. All right, so now we're going to go quickly over the magic system. As we get into the magic system of this world, I do want to go over the generalities of alchemy because that's what the entire thing's based around, with little twists and tweaks of the original systems here. So alchemy was a medieval chemical science and speculative philosophy. It was aiming to the transmutation, and transmutation is the act of converting one substance or one element or metal into another that is of higher value. It was also searching for a universal cure for disease and the discovery of a means to either prolong life indefinitely or basically to have immortality, which we could see in the stories of the Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone. That's where those come from, or the Alchemist Stone. All of those things all mean the same thing. It's the same stone. We have one in this story. It'll blow your mind when you read it. So now, since we know that that's where alchemy itself originated from, that it used to be like chemistry and just trying to create one thing from another and make it move up the scale, and they did use symbols. They used circles, there were angles, they had measurements. All those things went into these formulas that were very cryptic symbols written into what I refer to in this story as arrays. And of course, the people in this world, they have different types of inert magical abilities. And these inert magical abilities can be poured into these arrays. They can transfer their power from themselves into these arrays to activate them and have a chosen outcome, or if they're doing experiments, then they have an idea of what they want that outcome to be, but they have to do experiments to get to it, to write the proper array for it. Within this book, we do know, or we're directly mentioned, that there is a pyromancer who is a controller of fire. That is their main alchemy type. We also have vivomancers. Vivomancers can control tissue or heal bodies. Animancers tend to be able to control minds. And then, of course, there is necromancy. And necromancy is where dead bodies are reanimated and controlled. I wasn't really sure if this was supposed to be a part of vivomancy or animancy or both. I don't know about that. Then, of course, we do have another thing that's known as a metallurgist, and these people specialize in metallurgy and are able to transmute or use different types of metals to create specialized weapons for each alchemist's special abilities. That way it is easier for that alchemist to use them and make them change shape or do what they need them to do. I did like the idea of the alchemy base and then having these different branches coming out of the alchemy base. I do, however, wish it would have been a little bit clearer on the details and how we're oriented to these different types of alchemy, because it is a little confusing when you read it. It's hard to keep up with what each thing is and what it does and how it works, those kinds of things, but it does get through to you about what the story's talking about. I'm happy with the magic system. It's just that I would have liked a little bit more clarification. Would I recommend this story? Yes, I do, but I imagine even if I recommend this story, it's probably going to be to a very niched audience. As I mentioned previously, this was originally a Dramione fanfic, Manacled. I haven't read Manacled. However, now it stands on its own as Alchemized. The world building is its own world. It has its own magic system. The characters are their own people, so you don't have the same emotional attachment as you do with Draco and Hermione. No, Helena and Farron or Kane, they are their own people. So you get attached to the characters within this story without having that attachment to the characters from the Harry Potter stories. And as I've mentioned multiple times previously, it is very dark, it's very disturbing. The world building isn't really that dense, not in the sense of, oh, we have all of these places and all of this is going on and you're moving from here, you're moving to there, these are all the descriptions. It's not that complicated. The most challenging thing about this story is the large cast of characters and the complexity of the magic system with the details that we're given. And of course, the sheer length of the book, because it is 1,024 pages long. So if you are interested in this book, if you like dark, horror-esque fantasy, gothic fantasy, then I would say give this a go. You might like it, then again, you might hate it, but it will make you cry. I did thoroughly enjoy this book, even if it was highly disturbing in its own sense. And do I have any similar reads to this? I mean, similar in vibes? No, none. If you're just looking for another Dramione fanfic that has been traditionally published, then I would say try The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy by Bridget Knightley. It is also a Dramione fanfic. The FMC Romantasy, she is also a healer. MMC, he is an assassin. They have to come together and work together. This is, however, not a standalone. We are waiting on book 2 to come out this year. And I am yet to read Rose in Chains. I've heard mixed reviews on that, so I do want to check it out eventually. But as far as being like Alchemized in its dark, disturbing fashion, also being a Dramini fanfic, originally I don't have anything that is similar to that. Well, everyone, if you've made it to the end of this review, I know it's a long one. Thank you for sticking around. It means so much to me. As always, it's a pleasure having you here. And if you enjoyed going over all of the nitty gritty that has to do with what is Alchemized by Sen Lin Yu, then please give a like down below and subscribe to this channel. And I will see you guys next time for the next read. Bye!